Welcome, guys. It's Charlie Ward here with Elizabeth Lovius, my lovely, lovely friend and my own coach, who's going to be joining us for the second interview in our nature series for this year's Mental Health Awareness Week. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello, nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you here, and I was looking forward to talking to you and for all my listeners and my tribe to get to know you a bit better as well. And so Elizabeth, you work with leaders and change makers in corporate, is that right?
Yeah, not just corporate, but a lot in corporate, a lot in business. Yeah.
Cool. And what I'd like to ask you is the first thing that I always ask my people when they come and be interviewed is the name of my podcast is Courage, Dear Heart. And I'd love to know what courage means for you.
So when I hear the word courage, I hear the word encore, which is the French for with heart. And so when I hear courage, I hear a brave heart. I hear a heart that's a person that's heart-led. I hear the courage to be with one's heart. So for me, maybe the word courage has changed, but I know that it's rooted in the word heart. And, so's my work. So for me, the courage to be human is what this game seems to be about. The courage to be truly who we are and allow ourselves to be honest and truthful to our essence. And that's kind of always been a guide for me my whole life. So courage is both a word that speaks to me, but I think it's something that we're all encouraged to listen to, our courageous heart.
I love that answer, Elizabeth.
I love a good question, Charlie. As you know,
we're both wearing red.
We are. We seem to find quite often.
So as I mentioned, Elizabeth's my own coach. She's also in my little community, and I do some work with Elizabeth, so I know her very well. And we always seem to wear the same things. If you're listening to this on a podcast, we're wearing red beautifully. So I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about, because the title for your talk was human nature, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit there with the intro about courage. Can you tell me how you came to see your human nature as perfect?
Oh, what a brilliant question. Awesome question. How did I come to see my human nature as perfect? Well, let's put it like this, brothers and sisters. It was a long and winding road.
So yeah, let's hear it.
But we get there in the end. Okay. So really from very young, I've been always fascinated by what makes people tick. So really that hasn't changed. And that's got a lot to do with what I'm here to do, or what my path is, or, what I'm here to bring. It's an understanding of human nature. So I love this topic that we're going to dive into today, to just talk about this.
Yeah.
So really, why do people do what they do? Why do I do what I do? Demystifying that has been literally my life's work. But, it came about through, well, first of all, I was born into a really big family. So I was the eldest of 23 cousins, and my mother was the second eldest of 9. So there were always aunts and uncles and children and grandparents. There was just a life around me, and everyone was different. So I suppose from an early age, different characters, personalities, archetypes were around me all the time. And I was blessed enough to be born into what was really a little tribe, a little Dutch tribe. It did have a strong religious lens. So there was a wider tribe of people that all went to the Dutch Reformed Church. So there was this kind of sense of strong community where all is welcome, where everyone can be. So I think apart from the religious element, which was pretty strict, everything else was up for grabs sorry about my laptop making noises. Everything else was up for grabs in terms of, it takes a village, to make anything happen, to raise a child, to make an event happen, to create a wedding, etc. So I suppose in a way, there was room for me to be in if I take the religious element out of it, just as a being.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful start, you know, that was really quite a helpful start. And then I was just always fascinated in why people did what they did. And so I think I was 19 when I first started working at IBM, and they were very good at personal development. And they brought in a teacher who brought us into a room, and we would watch these videos, videos, and then discuss them. But the central piece of the videos that I discovered at age 19, which is quite well now, nearly 40 years, was you're responsible. You're responsible for what you create with your mind. And so I guess I was very lucky at that very early age to be encouraged to see where the nature of human nature from a very young age, you could say. And one of the aspects of human nature that we'll just kick off with here, because it seems to be appearing, is this idea that we are the author of our life.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Oh.
The author. Well, I'm just going to use, okay, I happened to hop in on Leanne's talk yesterday, which I highly recommend. And she uses another word, same meaning, sovereignty. So just joining some dots with what Leanne said, it's really the same phenomena, which is our capacity to create with our minds is part of our human nature. We're born into it. It's like fishes are born into the water. I think the correct term is actually fish, but you know what I mean. Fish are born into water. They don't know the water they're in because the water has always been there. So this creative power, our very own capacity of our minds to think, which is one of the essential pieces or principles of human nature, this part of us is always creating. In fact, it's the great storyteller, the great narrator within. So it looks like the story is being told and we're just living it. Like that's how it looks. But the truth is essence of who we are is the author. And so the story that we're telling is always one of our own making. Always. Because life is just happening, right? You know, shit happens. Things, 2020, you know, things happen.
2020.
Like, I just go 2020.
Forever etched in our souls.
I know, 2020 happened. So, you know, things are happening and then they're just happening. And then we create with this power of the mind, this energy called thought that arises in us. This power creates all of it, our experience, our feelings, what we are, you know, our judgments, our thoughts, our dreams, our hopes, our needs, our story about the past, our worry about the future. All of it is created in us by us. Yeah. And you know, when you're telling a bit of a nightmare story and it really doesn't look like it's yours, that too. That's the sovereign price that Leanne was talking about yesterday. You know, when you start to wake up to your true nature as a human being, which is that you're the creator and the storyteller, you have to kind of wake up to the truth that you've been telling yourself poo-poo stories. And that, you know, the consequences of all that poo, you know.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting perspective. So for those people that are listening to this that don't know anything about the principles that both you and I talk to and all the speakers will be talking to this week, principles behind sort of human nature, what would you say to someone who's like, what do you mean I've been making up crap in my head? Like my anxiety is real, my depression's real. What would you say to those people?
Well, I'd say that yes, that's the other phenomena of the creative power of thought, is it's designed to look real, right? It's both at once completely transient and not real in the sense that it changes all the time. Our our perspective, let's call it that for now.
Mm-hmm.
Our perspective constantly changes all the time, effortlessly, without us doing anything conscious. So on the one hand, it is a constant variable. And on the other hand, whilst ever we are having a thought and we are giving it energy, it is real. You know, so I just take my bank balance. So my bank balance can obviously go up and down like anybody's bank balance. But when it's tending towards low and close to the edge of the overdraft, and I haven't got any prospects of where the money's coming from, it looks like my bank balance is the source of my anxiety, you know. And so I get really anxious, and what will happen, and will I end up a homeless bag lady on the street? That's the end of my, you know,
I've
kind
had
of
similar thoughts.
catastrophic thinking, right? You know, if that, you know, if then boom. So that's a story gone mad in your head, looking real.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you feel like you're a bag lady now, and you feel worthless and hopeless and destitute and unloved and, you know, unwanted by society. And you're feeling all of that now, right? That's the creative power of thought right there, creating all of that, right? But it looking real, except it isn't. It's a very compelling, real story that you're telling yourself. Because here's the other thing. Same bank balance, same lack of prospects, you wake up in a frame of mind that feels really at peace. And that does not even bother you for a second. You have no thinking. You're creating no story about your bank balance. So you feel great. Same bank balance. So there is a world out there. I'm not going to lie, you know, it's a contact sport. I walk into a car, I'm hurt, you know, so there is a world out there. But my experience of that is a constantly changing thing. And if I can take that into account as part of my human nature, I can be aware when the kind of experience or storytelling that's happening is an old, habitual, smelly one. What is it you call them? Moldy old ones, Charlie?
Yeah.
Moldy old poo-poo story.
A shitty committee.
Yeah, you start to kind of wake up to your storyteller, and you start to notice that the quality of the story has a distinct effect on your experience right now. So bag lady story, I feel worthless and hopeless and unwanted. Peaceful frame of mind where I am a creator. I'm like, I have faith, I trust, I'm at peace and ease. Now, here's the killer. Which way of being or feeling do you think is more productive?
Me.
Yeah, but like anyone, right? This is whoever's listening. This is you. You know, bag lady on the corner, hopeless, helpless, worthless way of feeling and being, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because beings create action. Our being creates action. Or I'm at peace, I have faith, I trust, I know I'm the creator way of being. See, which one is more likely to bring you the quality of thinking that's going to move you forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's kind of no-brainer, except that we think the irony, just one this last thing, you know, the irony is we think the bag lady version is real, is going to happen, and we will almost want to hold on to it somehow. You know, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think most of us have been conditioned to believe the worst case scenario always, and that's coming from, you know, neuroscience. The brain wants to predict the worst case scenario, so that's coming from a survival point of view.
Yeah.
But unless you know that you have something that's got your back,
yes,
you're going to believe everything. And my own experience of that was, for 25 years, I had what's commonly known as post-traumatic stress disorder. So flashbacks I experienced whenever I saw a motorbike. Well, the irony is I wasn't even at the accident. So I created this flashback from my creation of what had happened in the accident, which I wasn't even there for. So, and that kept me, until I was able to see that was thought and that it was my creation, it held me prisoner. So I wondered, like, if you could talk to, a little bit about your own experience of mental health, mental wellness, but like, what was your experience prior to coming across? I know you said you had an early kind of foundational introduction to wellness, but what was your experience of mental illness?
I had a fantastic introduction to how the mind works and as part of our human nature, and how ultimately we're sovereign and the author of our own life. So I think on the mind, how it works, intellectual side, I had quite good grounding early on, and only got more and more clear. I remember 10 years later at age 29 coming across landmark education, which even more pointed me in the direction of we've got this creator within. What is it going to create? So that was great. But I tell you the part that didn't get addressed by any of that, which I think is what everybody's up against.
Which is?
Oh, you're all hanging now, aren't you?
We are hanging.
My words. Well, here we go. Feelings. How we feel. Because you can have all the clever little intellectual concepts you like. You can have written a book about them. But in the end, yours and mine, the nature of human nature, our experience is experienced through our feelings moment by moment, right?
Yeah.
So unless there's a shift in feeling, it's not really helping our understanding. It's not sufficient to shift perspective, to shift our being. So my own journey, as anybody who knows me will know, I am a person who has a lot of feelings and strong ones, right? And also pretty okay with that. I mean, I reckon people are in one of two categories. We either suppress our feelings or we lash out at other people. Either way, we're kind of taking the bad feeling and either turning it in or turning it out. So I was one of those strong feeling people, probably on the side of turning out, occasionally in. And really a lot. My mother used to say, whenever you walked in a room, whatever you were feeling, we'd all have to feel. So it was quite a big aura, and I think that is true. I think that's true. Unwitting on my part, but I think that we all know people like that. So that was my journey. And then probably from about age 12, really all my life, until relatively recently, I'd say till about age 50, I would have periods of extreme. Okay, I'll explain it how I experienced it at the time. Extreme low moods, extreme not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to do anything. And 40 years ago, or however long, 30 years ago, that didn't really have that diagnoses weren't in fashion, let's put it like that. Yes, somebody could get so depressed they couldn't move and be put in an institution, but nobody talked about that when I was growing up. So really what I now see was depression, but that didn't exist in the culture. So I felt the odd one out, right?
Yeah.
And so I would navigate those feelings as best I could. But after a while, I started to, my husband actually pointed it out, that I was preceding periods of great low mood with periods of high activity, which you could call manic, when I felt like Superwoman and I could do anything. And if we have time, I want to read a little poem about all of this at the end, if there is time for that.
There will be time, don't you worry. There'll always be time for your poetry.
Yeah, this is a cool one. And I don't even think you've heard this one, Charli. So this is a new one for you.
Oh.
I know. It's called On Being Human. So it's relevant for today and this story. So basically, I started to realize there was this, I didn't really realize that would be overstating it. But every now and then I noticed a pattern, that I have high activity and feel like I could do anything, and then followed by a crash. And in the high activity, I would want to achieve everything because I didn't know where the crash was going to come. Now, that's what we now know as bipolar.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that. And then I started to understand more about different diagnoses, and I started to realize that probably I had that, but it didn't bother me that much. It was just my life and who I was. And so it never occurred to me to go and get it treated or anything. It was just a pattern. I would, something about me, so that was just part of me. But what I will say is that in the periods of low mood, up until about 10 years ago, and I think many people will feel like this if they have a mental health challenge, that when the mental health challenge kicks in, it's almost like that's the shameful, dirty, true secret about who we are. And I really want to say to you, whoever's listening, and to you, Charli, that that's the lie. It looks so true that, the depression and the hopelessness and the worthlessness and the kind of darkness or panic attack or kind of whatever deep sense of shame, whatever it is, that's kind of at the source of your challenge mentally. The confusion many of us have is that that's who we really are. Yeah. And this kind of upbeat, optimistic, peaceful kind of inflow is a lucky accident. It's a lucky accident. And whilst ever it looks like that, Charli, I mean, you know this, you're a mental health nurse. It looks like a problem to be fixed, right? Our mental health challenge looks like a problem to be fixed. And you know what's really difficult about that, Charli? The whole world kind of is looking in that direction too, especially this week. Yeah. You have a mental health diagnosis, you've got a problem to be fixed. You yourself have trained in all of these modalities. And I think this is what's kind of extraordinary about it. And Leanne touched on it yesterday, this what if it's just neurodiversity? What if it's daisies and orchids that just need different conditions? What if how we are is exactly how we're meant to be? And when we're in our healthful version of that, it's perfect. I mean, you know me, I am probably one of the most extraordinarily productive people when I'm on a high. It's like I do 6 months work in a week. Now, if you look at nature itself and human nature, the corollary of that is fast, slow, up, down, in, out, plenty, less. It would make sense if you had a high energy period like autumn of harvesting, to then take a slow period of going in like winter. That bipolar starts to not look like a problem. It starts to look like an asset or a natural order of things. And I think that's, if we look, we'll see that true of every mental health disorder when it's allowed to just be. That's a lot of words, but I hope I've answered your question there somehow. My own story.
You did. And I think you answered it beautifully, because what you speak to is the perfection of all things. Yes. And of course, as you so rightly said, mental health, there's a lot of conditioning around that in the medical model, rather than looking at a person as a holistic person. And like you, I had chronic anxiety, but didn't know that's what it was until I had an insight around it. Mm. Can you remember what your insight was around? Like, was it that that it was all perfect and meant to be, or was it something else?
I remember it's so wonderful that we're in the week of nature, because I remember somebody somewhere saying, whatever's running nature is running you, right? So the trees I'm looking at right now are growing themselves and I've got an almond tree there, I've got an olive tree there, I've got a cypress there, I've got a cherry moya tree over there. So it doesn't work for the almond tree to try and become a cypress. That doesn't make any sense. So I started to kind of recognize the perfection in nature first. Like if you've ever looked at an orchid or a peony or a rose, you know, it's so perfect in its essence of itself.
Yeah.
And the energy, you know, the universal energy that's created all the stars, the moon, the planets, us, you know, it's all the same. And it's just got to be, right? Simple. Consciousness itself, if you want. But let's just say an intelligent energy. I think most people can go with the idea of an intelligent energy.
Yeah.
As the creator. Well, let's say most people know they're not making the sun rise and set. So whatever the thing is that is, has an intelligence to it. Okay. So when I started to kind of get a glimpse of the idea in nature, the perfection of nature, which is very visible, how could I be not that? How could I be separate to that? How could I, as a being, as an animal on this planet, not also be perfectly designed to be me? It's just logic, right? So I started to believe it. That was my first move. You know, and belief, I'm sorry about this, but belief's not going to help you. It's a great stepping stone, but it's not going to help you transform. So if you've got lots of beliefs about stuff, that's great. But in the end, it's an embodied knowing for yourself, an insightful knowing, a sight from within, a seeing for yourself. It's like, you know, insight into is like when you get insight into riding a bike. You can read up all the books, you can get all the instructions from in your ear, but in the end, you've got to get balance. And the moment you get balance, you can ride a bike. That's what we're talking about, that kind of insightful, embodied, get it for yourself feeling. So belief is okay, but it doesn't give you the feeling of knowing for yourself. But you can point yourself in that direction and look for evidence. And that's what I did, you know. I started to recognize that my own way of being, what if it was perfectly fine? And it took, honestly, I want to say probably 5 years of undoing, Charli, all the stories, back to our storyteller, all the stories our innate storyteller had told that were not that. Okay, so all the not that stories, all the you're not perfect stories had to kind of dissolve and disappear and fall away. Now that's a whole other journey, but I would say in essence, I had to be willing to see beyond the stories that I had told. And that, interestingly, takes courage, dear heart.
That is why I named the podcast Courage, Dear Heart, because my own experience is that I think, well, firstly, I think a lot of people show courage and they don't realize it. But secondly, I knew that it was going to take courage for me to change my life again and really look into the wounding and the grief and the pain rather than keep reliving it. And I saw hope in this understanding. I had an insight which changed my life, but I knew that it was going to keep taking courage to look in the direction of pain, to be free from it.
Well, what it takes actually, Charli, is yes, to look in the direction of pain, to be willing to feel that which you have been avoiding feeling sometimes your whole life. Because there's normally how it works is there's some kind of trauma. So we're all kind of traumatized by something at some point, most of us, very few are not. And you can't predict what will be, and what is a trauma for one person is fine for another. So it's a very personal thing. But let's just go with the simplicity that most people have experienced some kind of trauma, normally between 0 and 7. They may or may not remember it. But it's the source of their patterns, habits. Let's call those habits of thought, nothing more, nothing less. But a case of mistaken identity. So we end up identifying who we are with those habits of thought. I am like this, I am like that, you know, I'm a shy person, or I am I don't like to get out my comfort zone, or whatever it is we create. It's all just a story. So we end up not wanting to feel that original trauma, right? So then our whole life, consciously and unconsciously, but mostly unconsciously, is organized to not feel that thing. So I felt the shame of being having done something terribly wrong and upset the people that love me the most. So shame and rejection. So those were the things. So shame and rejection, no, not going to feel that. So then everything becomes around not that. So we build a story why it takes courage is we have to be willing, really, technically, to be willing to feel that thing we didn't feel, that we've been trying to avoid feeling our whole life. Now that is going to take courage. But this is the good news. When we can feel what is real without adding anything to it, just the experience. And you're very good at this because you work a lot with the body, and you just kind of can really see that feelings are actually just embodied sensations, right?
Yeah.
When we can give them space, there's no fight in our system. When there's no fight in our system, and you know more about this than me, the nervous system relaxes. When there's no fight, there's no threat. So when we can feel the feeling without it feeling like a threat, then we can settle. And in the space of settling, the energy, which is all that feelings are, energy in motion, emotion, energy in motion, can move. And then, like any movement in nature, like ever smelt the earth after a pile of rain? It's like renewed, isn't it? You know, ever walked along the seafront after a storm? It's just so bright and light and white. So what happens is, after we allow the feeling, the energy in motion to happen, we're cleared out. There's a clarity. There's a something else. And then that whole experience starts to make more sense to us. We have wisdom about it, a natural wisdom, which I know Ian's going to talk to us a lot more about. You know,
he is, but I wanted to ask you actually on that, because I know Ian's going to talk to natural wisdom, but you often talk about, you've mentioned today the hidden variable as being thought, but you often talk about the hidden constant.
yes.
And I know you have kind of talked about it, but for those who may have missed it, what is that?
So, you know, back to this long and winding road journey, and to kind of knowing myself as perfect, and then nature helping me see, and then really what it ultimately took was a willingness to feel whatever I was experiencing, to allow it all, to welcome it all. However, if we do not have an essential understanding of our true nature as energy, and you could even say spiritual energy, if we don't have a relationship with that, it's too scary to feel what is real, because we're afraid of falling into the abyss, right? Yeah. But if you know that there's no abyss, and what you fall into is your true self, which is at peace, at home, you just being you, being in alignment with your core, your essence. If you know that that's the foundation of you and me, there's nothing to fear. There's no feeling that you can't feel against a backdrop of your essential essence of okayness. And I had to undo, like if you remember I said earlier, I had to undo whatever was in the way of me seeing myself as whole and innocent. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to lie, you know, being brought up in a hardcore Protestant upbringing where you're told you're sinful, there's a lot to undo that. I was told I was sinful from like 3 or 4 years old.
Oh, goodness.
Well, that's what you're told. Jesus died for your sins. You're sinful. So I had to undo a lot of the inheritance of you are not, there is something wrong and bad about you. which also chimed very nicely with what happened to me when I was 4. So it was very baked on. I like to call these, there are some beliefs that don't look like beliefs, they're baked on truth. And it like was one of those baked on. And then eventually I started to see that whilst ego, which, you know, is always there and will have its way with you from time to time, that's not who we are. Our ego is not our essence. Our ego is a thought-created identity that protects itself. And so that part of us can kind of be sinful or whatever. But, you know, this essence, this true nature, this baby being born is pure energy. And when you look in a baby's eyes, you see the intelligence and the presence. And I started to go, that makes more sense to me, that's who we really are. And we can get into habits of egoic, you know, identifying ourselves as something else mistakenly, but that's not our essence. So the more I started to look for that as our fundamental essence, the more I settled and started to have a connection with myself that was beyond stories and more to do with just who I'm being and who we're all being. When we settle down on the inside, we are in alignment with our well-being. And in that place, we are wise. We're not missing anything. We know what's needed. And I think it was cultivating the relationship with that part of myself. And I can almost hear the question, how do you do that? But, you know, that is the direction to look in. It's more of a seeing than a doing, though. I will say that. It's a recognizing rather than something that you have to do to get to, because it's already here. So I don't know if I've answered your question again, but hopefully that was interesting.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it was wonderful to listen to that. And I sort of wanted to ask you, but I think you've probably already answered this anyway, but in case anyone's missed this, you've been talking about our innate health, human nature as being perfect and part of a greater whole. Your depth of knowing this, how has it impacted on your life?
Oh, what a lovely question. Oh my God, that's a fantastic question, because what the question is so good because it presences something in this conversation right now. And I think that's the simple answer. That's the simple answer. And now I'm going to present some stuff. It allows me to be present with my life, with the joy of my life, with the husband who brings me breakfast in bed every morning, with the children that are doing okay even in a pandemic, 18 and 19, you know, 18 and 20, which I personally think is the hardest age for them of all ages. It's just when they're turning into adults, that's cusp. You've got a son similar age.
I have, yeah. Zach's 21, yeah.
I do feel for them in this pandemic. I feel the rest of us somehow are shielded, but they've got to make their life in a pandemic. They're anyway. Appreciating who they are, appreciating myself, my gifts, my talents, appreciation in general for what is. I can focus on what isn't, like the best of them, you know. I wish it were different over here. But, you know, this storyteller, this author that we are, the author can always choose to write the chapter of what isn't or what is. You know, it's the same. And so I think having this fundamental nowhere to get, nothing to fix, nothing broken, or everything whole and complete takes a lot off your mind in terms of what needs fixing, changing, doing, what isn't. And just simply returns you to a presence of mind where you see more of what is here now. And as far as I can tell, I mean, and I've navigated all sorts of tragedies and challenges, deaths and financial disasters and, you know, fear and ill health and itinerant living. I've really tried a lot of different things over the years and experienced them. death in my family. So I can tell you honestly, it doesn't matter what life throws at you. When we can meet it with a presence and knowing we're already okay, then we can feel anything. We can feel grief and loss and shame and anxiety and depression, but they're not, it's not like we're getting on the feelings train and someone else is driving. It changes. We have those feelings. They're not running off with us anymore. We just have them, welcome them in, and they clear us out for some new delight, as Rumi says.
So, because you've just mentioned Rumi, would you read your poem for us, please?
Oh, my poem. Okay. Yeah. Let me just see if I can. Oh, no, my phone's decided to die, so it's going to have to be on the laptop. Let me just grab it up. Okay. So this is I'm being human and real, and it's a little bit of a kind of snapshot in time, but it speaks to a lot of the things we've been talking about today. So here we go. The I can do anything Superwoman highs, the focus, the flow, and how the heart flies. The no matter what happens, I can handle it chant. The ease, the joy, the accomplishment. Sacrificial of service as if I'm the hero. Late nights, early mornings, pushing through. The pack it all in, one thing to the next. Timetable for everything, including rest. It made sense at the time. It looked necessary and real. It seemed to feel fine, but no space left to heal. The I can't do anything. Life is shit blues. No focus, no flow. The heart's lost its cues. The weeping and lost and vulnerable feels. It's hopeless, I'm helpless, and nothing feels real. My mood hits the floor and I just can't get up. Tears run down my face and into my cup. My life is a mess and will always be. Some things can't be bettered by a nice cup of tea. Light shines through a crack. There seems less to mourn. Perspective then enters. It comes on its own. Hope peers round the corner and the way can be shown. And what was a trouble, a drag, or a curse feels somehow just normal, not quite so adverse. And from the dark night, the soul has now seen that sunshine and rain can both be serene. And then I remember, it's all just a story. The hero, the victim, imposters of glory. The glory of triumph as wispy as fame. And that gory disaster, it's just how it's framed. What I do know to be true right down in my core, being human is rough. Our hearts can get sore, but our essence, the life force, and this too is true, is made to bounce back, for divine we are too. In the end, I can see that there's only one curse, the one where we judge us and conclude the worst. For judgment brings with it, through necessity, a kind of illusion, not reality, and judgments are fleeting, unreal, you could say. Knowing this to be true can and does save the day. So knowing what's real and what is just not is the best we can hope for when we lose the plot.
Oh my God, I had goosebumps for most of that poem. I think that's the perfect place to end, Elizabeth. I really have appreciated your honesty and wisdom and knowledge, and it's just been incredible to sort of piece, you know, from Leanne's to this one. I think really flowed beautifully, and that's why I trust that that all is well.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Oh, total pleasure. That was so fun.
Have to do it again.
I'm sure we will sometime.
All right, you take care, and I'll speak to you very soon. Lots of love.
Bye bye now.
Bye.